Happy New Year! The Developing Your Football World podcast is back, and we have father and son coaching duo Keith and David Mayer with us today, hosts of the excellent Goldust podcast and authors of two brilliant books, Goldust, How to Become a More Effective Coach Quickly, and The Lone Wolf, a story about assumptions, authenticity, and action. You'll learn a lot from this one. Enjoy. Keith, David, thank you very much for giving up your time today and coming on to speak to me. I'm so looking forward to this. You both came heavily recommended from past guest Paul Barry, who spoke so highly of you. So I'm thrilled to have you both on. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Will. It's very kind of you to create the time and space for us to be with you today.
Same. Yeah, thank you very much for having us on, and we're looking forward to it.
Thank you both for coming on, sharing your insight and your experiences. So you're currently, if I'm right, based in two different countries. Is that correct?
We are. Yep, well, two different countries, but we speak every day.
So, David, you're over in Utah, and is that 7 hours behind us?
It's 7 hours. I'm in Salt Lake City.
Beautiful. How's the weather this time of year?
Cold. It's very cold. It's actually, as I look outside right now, there's lots of icebergs, snow on the ground. We had 18 inches of snow a week ago, last Wednesday, should I say. So it came down pretty heavy. It's still on the ground, and it's probably going to be here till around March, April time. So it's very cold currently.
Does it look Christmassy?
It does. Not as Christmas. I need a Christmas hat, but yes, it does look Christmassy.
And Keith, where are you?
So I live in the sunny northwest of England. I live just outside of Wigan, and have resided here for all my life, other than travelling in and out the country, doing varying things, which I'm sure we'll explore shortly. But I'm a Wigan lad, born and bred, and all my family's here. But I do like to travel a lot as well. And unfortunately, during the recent world situation with COVID, that's restricted my travel. But hopefully it opens up and frees up, so we can get some wheels on the, put some rubber on the deck again.
Oh yeah, got a lot of traveling to make up for these last couple of years. So you two do a lot of great work in the coaching education space. You're very generous with what you share. You have two books now and a podcast as well, which has got 53 episodes so far. Is that correct?
I think we're on 54 now. It's close. It's around there. The 55 actually. 55 now.
Oh, brilliant. And you've had some fantastic guests on now. All of them are brilliant, but I've been able to listen to a few. Steve Salis, Harry Watling, Jason Wilcox, Tessa Payne, Michael Beale, Michael Dawson, Per Mertesacker, Dan Abrahams, Damien Hughes, Thomas Gronemark, Luke Chadwick, Tosh Farrell. These are high caliber guests, which I've really thoroughly enjoyed listening to. You do a great job of getting this out there for everyone. So thank you very much for that. And I've really enjoyed your book too. And I'd like to talk about both as we go on, but I'll leave that to the end. For now, I'd like to ask you both about your first steps into coaching. What got you into football coaching? Why do you still do it? So we'll start with Keith. What got you into coaching?
Well, I'm a failed footballer. So I played as a young apprentice pro at Bolton Wanderers, and then went to Wigan Athletic, and then got injured. I was a young pro then, and then an opportunity came along, Will, in 1981 for me to travel over to the US and, if you like, become a chaperone for a junior team that were from not far from Manchester. And I went out there, and the opportunity presented itself for me to deliver or work at a camp coaching. And I earned $100 in the week, and I was only earning £16.35 a week as an apprentice pro, and then young pro, which was very little money. And I earned over $100. Now you go, well, was I doing it for the money? Well, I enjoyed the coaching part of it, and I enjoyed the exploration, and I guess the responsibility. So I dropped into it back in 1981, and have been coaching ever since then. But once you start, it's very difficult to keep that, or to stop the wheels, particularly if you enjoy something with a passion, of which I did. And I'm sure we'll delve a little bit deeper shortly, but that's how I first started, Will, back in 1981, working at a little coaching camp. Thought I was going to be the next England coach. And then I just knew there was something about it that I enjoyed, and that's kept me in the game since 1981. But it really does excite me to know that I've now got a son who's, following a similar path, and I'm sure he'll share with you what his journey was about and how he got involved with it as well.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, my first steps into coaching probably happened before I even knew it, because I wasn't actually coaching. I was just watching exemplars. So as a young boy, I was playing in the academy system at home, and I just went with my dad, and he was coaching. I remember vividly, he was coaching at Forest, and I would go with him whenever I wasn't training. So if there was anything in midweek or weekends, I'd go with him, spent time around him. There was coach education stuff at Lily Shoal that I'd go to. There was a lot of FA events, and I was just watching exemplars. I didn't know it, I was just doing it. And it was only because I was there that happened. But I watched the mannerisms. I watched how those people interacted with the players, and obviously watched the sessions. And like I said, I don't even think until later on I realized that I'd picked up a lot of those traits and then used them when I was then coaching. So people say that I act like my dad, or I have similar mannerisms to him when I'm coaching. It's really because I just modeled and took what obviously worked and molded it into who I am. And really from an actual delivery standpoint, I think I was still playing full time when I first started coaching. And similar to my dad, it was coaching camps in the US. It was a lot of voluntary stuff. And I was also doing one-on-one sessions where I had to break stuff down into detail for players. And it was good learning. I would say I look back on those times, and in comparison to probably where I am now, I was miles off it, because I didn't truly know why I was doing what I was doing. Sounded good, and it probably looked good, and I'm sure people got learning from it. But if I were to do it again now, I'm sure it would look completely different. So yeah, that was my, I guess, a brief tour around where I first started, and since then, over the past, I'd say 12 years, I've now been on 4 different continents and coached in lots of different places. So it's took me all over the world too.
Well, fantastic. My ambition is to go coach as many different places as I can to learn so much. So much I could ask you from me. I'm going to go into, you, David, picked up a lot of good football and coaching information through watching examples of other people, almost like through osmosis. Didn't quite realize the learning experience that was happening to you. And then when you transitioned from player into coach, what was it that said, I like this, I want to keep doing this? What did you enjoy about coaching that made you then continue with it?
It was only really when I stopped playing that it became something that I wanted to do. When I was playing, I enjoyed it, but I was still so focused on playing that I didn't really want to spend too much time coaching. It was just something that, because I enjoyed it, I'd do it in my free time. And as I stopped playing, and obviously as you get older, you see the impact that you can have on people's lives. And I think when you get those experiences, it goes a long, long way. So as I did stop playing and went into coaching, it was the nearest thing I got to being involved in the game. And I grew up in a family where my mum played for England, my dad played, and then has obviously been involved in the game at a high level, coaching and influenced so many people's lives, that I was just immersed in the sport. So I love what I do. I absolutely love it. I love that element of impacting people's lives, but I love the fact that there is so much to learn, and that never truly stops.
Yeah, especially with the way that football is constantly evolving. It's almost like you learn a little bit and you through the looking glass and you realise how much more there is to learn. So, Keith, you, after that first experience coaching in the US and the summer camps, what made you want to continue and go down that path?
I think when I reflect back on that, Will, where I am now to where I was back then, if I had to bridge the gap in between, it's what it contributed back then to my life and what it does now. So the commonality and similarities are, David's already just mentioned it. You're impacting a life, and we're actually creating memories, not only in our own life but in other people's lives. And as facilitators, we've got to be very careful how we do that, because we can influence in such a way where it could be detrimental. Now, back then, I didn't know that. I just knew that because of the experience and the feedback that was coming from the players, and equally my feedback was I thought was okay at this. So the enjoyment and the enthusiasm that I currently have, I say, as it waned over the years, no, it's not waned. What it has done, it's created, if you like, this a chasm or a huge library of connections. And I didn't know back then what it was doing and what it has done. And as you mentioned right at the top of this, is at the beginning, is where we are currently. And that's, we've David and I have co-authored a best-selling book, which that would never have occurred, and neither have we brought David into the world, my wife and I, for David to coach. But it's what it does. It's what it does for me, and I get a massive kick and a great deal of satisfaction knowing that we're influencers. We can call them coaches, but we're influencers. I remember some years ago traveling back from South Korea with a good friend of mine, Dick Bates. He directed the pro license. I know you may go on to that shortly, but it was all those memories, and traveling itself. You can have your Premier League coaches, and I think that's fantastic. You can have your youth team coaches who are working in the game full time. But the vast majority of coaches on the planet are not professional coaches. They'll have that professional mindset. And, my career path has taken me down, the professional game to a degree, although I've never worked full-time in the game. I say fortunately, it's been a choice. I've had opportunities to go into the game full-time, and I've chosen not to. It gives me freedom, Will. It also gives me the opportunity to present myself, hopefully in such a way where I am impacting and taking players and coaches on a journey that can actually help them become even better at doing what they do. And that is the fulfillment that I get from that. I can't articulate it. Although in years I've been coaching over 4 decades, or just on 4 decades, I still feel 26, 28 in my head. That's what it does for me. I'm 60 years of age now. I never share that, but now I am. But I love the thought of someone like you are doing. You're creating this space for us to come out, for us to share. I love this. I love it. I mean, there's nothing better. That's what we do as coaches. We like talking about ourselves, but equally, It's what it does for us. And for me to be in the game for so long, I still have that passion. That the more and more I think I know where I think I know, the more and more I find out I don't. There's so much to know and so much to learn.
So with this passion that you still have after this time, do you hold any ambitions for your coaching currently?
Is that a question to me?
Well, for you first, Keith, and then David will ask after.
Yeah. No, do you know, Will, my aspirations I don't have a target any longer. I can't go any higher in coaching qualifications, but you can get the pro license, and the pro license is for those that want to work in the Premier League as a manager, and that's not going to be my bag. I've no interest in it. I've had the opportunity, always asked, to do the pro license, or whether I would have an interest in it. And I don't. The only interest that I have in the game is actually helping others. That's it. I'm quite happy now taking a back seat, watching my son become an exemplar, become the best that he can become. And I love that. I know next month I'm excited. I'm really, really excited about it. I'm actually going out to the US, to help and assist, and be an assistant for him. And he always used to be bought. So I'm now the BBC. I'm the ball bibbing cone man. I don't know if he's going to treat me well. If he's going to feed me, I'll give him some water. But I don't have any aspirations to become a professional, work in the professional game. That's not really in my early years, maybe, but no longer. So I don't have something that I've got a burning desire to achieve. No.
But your main motivations are helping others, and it's that selflessness of coach that has
absolutely.
So, David, sorry, Keith, go ahead.
No, sorry, I interrupted you there, Will, so apologies.
Sorry, I think might have been a bit of delay on that one, but nevertheless, David, what are your ambitions?
It's going to sound kind of funny, this actually. So I'm just really ambitious in life. Not just around football. I love what I do. I love impacting people's lives. I love learning. So I got my UEFA license a couple of years back. I'm now working on my USA license, and I love it. It's intense, but just that element of learning and growing and seeing myself develop is fantastic. But I value other things outside of football as well. And when I said it sounded a bit crazy, sometimes I'll sit at home, or I'll be in the shower, I'll be driving, and I'll think, how cool would it be to be an astronaut? Or how cool would it be to go and climb Everest, or to work on Wall Street? And the reason that I think that is because I think there are so many things in life to achieve, that those kind of things, what I look at them and go, what could I learn doing those things to help me in what I currently do? Because I'd learn so much more about myself, and I'm sure I'd learn a great deal about other people too. And I'm not saying, by the way, that I'm going to become an astronaut or I'm going to go and work on Wall Street. I'm sure at a point, like to climb Everest. My fiance, she says otherwise. She says that's not going to happen. But I think there are so many things to achieve, not just in the game, but out the game. But from a footballing standpoint, I believe in my ability to teach, and I believe in my ability to build relationships and to lead others. And more than anything, I believe in my ability to learn, and at a fast pace, and to take those learnings and implement them. So because of that, I'm confident in what I do, and I believe that I could work in numerous environments around the world. both professionally and at a youth level. Now, I know I have a lot to learn. And I know if I was thrown into a variety of coaching roles, I'd figure it out and I'd make it work over time. But I know I'd also fail at times too. But I love traveling. There's no question about that. I love experiencing new cultures and meeting new people. And I think that's one thing that the game has already brought me, is the amount of people that I've met. But I think my dad said this to me a while ago, that the vast majority of his friends came through the game. And I'm already on my way to being in that boat. So besides my best friend from school, every single person really that I speak to came from football, every single one. And that is something that I value. But like I said, I value travel. I value learning new things. I like being challenged. I like being uncomfortable at times. So to go back to the original, I am ambitious. I think I have things to offer. And I also think I have a lot to learn. And in order to get those things, I think you have to be put in situations where sometimes it might be a little uncomfortable, or being put in experiences that you may have not previously had before.
So you mentioned,
Hey, Will, this thing here now, we have, we would not be on this call, on this podcast, if it wasn't for one thing and one thing alone. We can call it, title it, can't we? Whoever invented the football, that's the commonality. How many lives are touched because of that thing across the planet? One that little spherical thing, football. It's just, I've coached in China, I've coached in India, I've been to South Korea, I've coached many different countries and had involvement. And no matter whoever you are, I remember going over to Sao Paulo some years ago with an international team, with one of the teams, and I was with a Brazilian national team coach. He couldn't speak any English whatsoever. But what was actually taking shape was magic in motion, because it was being displayed through demonstration. So sharing of good practice doesn't come through being able to speak the same language, but that one, the ball itself, oh man, it's magical, isn't it?
absolutely, it's one of the most effective ways of bringing people together. And you look at what's happened the last couple of years, you see almost the absence of football in a lot of spaces and how much it's meant to people. But I think it's more a vehicle for its connection. Ultimately, football is a game of human connection. You have to connect with your teammates, and to some level you connect with the opposition, and you connect with all the stakeholders, be it fans, parents, other coaches. It brings everyone together for a common cause, to compete, to play, to enjoy, to improve. It's everything that happens in life happens in football, and the ball is like the focal point for all that. And I know they cost about £3 from Sports Direct these days, but it's everything about life can be summed up in that little round thing. It's really hard to explain that to people that don't get it. You just talking from your experiences, I can relate to so much of that, being in different places, people you've never met that you share very little in common with. Suddenly the ball comes out and you're all best mates, you're all family. It has that effect. It breaks barriers, it builds bridges. It's brilliant, and that's why we do what we do, to be involved in that. And I'm sure if I asked you both this real quick, like what your best memories are of football, your best achievements, it's probably not linked specifically to a trophy or a league position, but more to the people that you met along the way, the people you experienced with. You may have won a league or a cup, but it was the people that you won it with that were great. Or you may have several times been through an experience with the worst team in the league, but they're all brilliant people, and you win that one game of the season, and those experiences, it's because of the people you're with. And so if you can think of any of those instances where, you know, it's been the people, not necessarily the trophy that's meant that much to you. Can you think of any examples from your past?
Yeah, I straight away. I coached in Tanzania, and never forget it. I'll never. I'd never been to Africa at this point, so didn't know what to expect. Obviously, didn't speak the language, and to be totally honest, I was just the token white guy. So you walk through the streets, and everybody turns and looks at you. And I'd been told this before, and I doubt it. And I went to Africa and to Tanzania and coached there, and the guys that I met, the coaches, I actually still stay in touch with them. The very broken English, very broken English. And one thing that, or I'll give you two examples that I'll never forget. So I'm setting up the session, and by the way, this session is on dirt, and some of the stuff that was on this, it's not a field, it was just dirt. Some of the stuff, you'd have needles on it, there was all kinds. There'd be bags and rubbish and dog dirt, and everything is on this big field of dirt. And I'm setting this field up, and kids start rocking up. Some of them, and I didn't know this until afterwards, some of them hadn't been fed. They hadn't eaten all day. And at this point, it's 4 p.m. Some of them had no shoes on. Some of them have got obviously clothes that have been handed down to them or given through charity with holes in them, all that kind of stuff. And these kids come over, and it would be very easy in that situation. And I think if you were probably in a first world country, that you would be sulking about it, or you'd have a lot to complain about. And these kids turned up with the biggest, every single day, the biggest smiles on their faces every day. And that in itself was just such a humbling experience. And it taught me so much, because their appreciation of what was being given to them. And for me, I was just going out delivering and helping from a football standpoint, but it was much more than that. And I actually saw, when you talk about making the most of what you've got, they built goals out of bamboo, and they were sticking them in holes in the floor. I saw a group of kids actually unstitch a leather ball to fix it, to take the bladder out and fix it, and then put it back in and stitch it back up. And I'd never seen it before. I'd never seen anything like that ever in my life. And just it's such a vivid memory for me that I'll take forever. I'll store that with me forever. And like I said, some of the people that were there, I still stay in touch with. And knowing that, even though for me going over it was delivering, that I've probably impacted a lot of lives on that trip, but they probably don't realize that they probably impacted my life more than I did them.
Yeah, that's the gift of it, isn't it? They have no idea what effect they have on you.
Mm-hmm. So like David, I traveled to South Africa, working alongside a project called Balls to Poverty. I worked with a project manager back then, and we went over to South Africa and took over something like 3,000 balls over a period of 4 or 5 years. I only went over there twice, although I've been to South Africa more than that, but with that particular project twice. And I have this real vivid memory of an experience that will be it's etched in there forever, for eternity. Similar type of setting, no grass, hundreds of kids. I mean, they come in with nothing. They have no socks, no shoes. And I remember this young girl. So at this point, what we had, you just have to see it. There were around about 150, 200 kids on this grass surface, and we've given balls out that have been bought for by people from the UK. And there was this young girl. I look over to my left shoulder. I look to my left. There's games taking place. You've got smiles on faces where they've got absolutely nothing. We're in townships. This is not play act. This is going into fire. Coaching, you can either walk or you can take an elevator. That's what you get. Ex-players, former players, and then they become the first team coach. And I'm not suggesting, by the way, that's not the wrong way. But I'm not sure whether those that take the elevator actually understand what it's like taking the walk. You have to take a walk and experience these things to really get great gratitude and understand what it's like for those that work their socks off in the grassroots game, which is great. But I've looked over my left shoulder and I see this young girl, and she mustn't have been any older than, I'm going to say 9 years of age, if that. And in her arms, she's got a little girl that can only have been 2. No socks, little dress, pair of them. And I look to my left and I see this. And I'm not ashamed in sharing it with you. I actually had a moment because it was grounding for me. We've got music playing that we'd brought some ghetto blasters. These kids are loving it. And I look to my left and I see this young girl walking in baby in arms. And then I got this reflection, and then it was instant. I thought my son, David, and I thought my daughter, straight away, instantly, where I've got warmth, we got food, we've got what we need. It brought back to reality. That's all we need: warmth, food, and somewhere to live. And I look there and no socks on, no shoes. And I actually have a picture. I've got this young girl, baby. I've caught, I'm holding this 8-year-old girl in arms, and I've got this little baby, and I'm actually carrying the 2 of them. So I took my socks off, and I took my socks off and gave him the socks. It was like Christmas Day, Will. And again, we mentioned it, that it would never have happened if it wouldn't have been for football or the connection that a ball brings. It would never have happened. But it was the story behind the story. It's the metaphor. It's the learning lessons and putting into reality of what we have. We don't need anything. We don't need a lot to survive. I'm not suggesting that those that do very well out the game, you've not earned it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying, by the way, that those that have taken the elevator and gone straight to the top have not earned that right. No, I'm not. What I'm saying is we sometimes need to go on a walk, and each and every one of us need to experience that, because there's more going on than just football. We're interacting with people at a level that we never really know what influence and impact we're having on their life as they have on ours. But when we step back a little bit and just take stock and what is going on, there's some magic taking place around the world, and we're part of it. And it's great to be on it, by the way.
Yeah, I think I put it maybe not as eloquently as I'd like to, but football it's not a serious thing, and how privileged we are to be in a position where we can take football seriously. Like, we've got such little strife in our lives that we have food, water, shelter, security, that we can put our time and energy into something as unserious as football. Because on a grand scheme of things, it's just a game. But that game means so much, and it brings so many people together. So I love that. And I'm going to use, next time I get engaged in an argument on Twitter about ex-pros getting an easy way into football, into coaching, I'm going to use that. Take the elevator. It sums it up perfectly. But you're right. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are no good at the job. But when it comes to being an effective coach, you have to have a very diverse range of experience, because you are in a position where you have to be able to relate to a large group of people. And if your experience of life is fairly narrow and homogenous, it's hard for you to develop those extra skills that don't necessarily take place in that environment. So, for instance, I went to a private school from the age of 3 to 16, and that was a very, very narrow view on life. And you see the pathway would have you go from there to a good college, to a good university, into a good job, and until you get outside of it, you don't see what the real world is like. And I feel that academy to pro to coach can sometimes do that to people, and the better ones, you see, they often go, and as I say, they earn their stripes in other places. But I'd like to ask a couple of questions on that, circle back, because there's a lot of this gold dust in this. It's that good. So you, I'd like to ask you about skills you've developed outside of football that have benefited your coaching. So may it be like you both mentioned Tanzania and South Africa. Although it was football related, the skills that you would have learned would be more to do with human connection. So can you think of anything you've learned outside of football that has benefited your coaching?
Loads. So many. I know we're both big believers of developing things outside of football, and even being involved in things outside of football. And I've done a lot that is now helping me in the game. I'd say most of them probably revolve around the language that I use and how I use it to get the most out of those around me. So we're both NLP master practitioners, and so NLP, it's Neurolinguistics. So it's based around the language that you use and the way that you use it to affect people's neurology. It's made a huge difference in my life already. That is now positively impacting the people that I work with. I have a couple of businesses outside of coaching, and I've learned so much from that too. And some of them have absolutely nothing to do with football. And I think it's more dealing with people, problem solving, exploring alternative options, being creative, and sometimes figuring things out on the fly. I think there are crossovers, and we've had people on the podcast who have worked in so many different fields, and it's because they've become exceptional at certain things that are fundamental across so many walks of life. So somebody in business could be exceptional at managing people. Well, there's a crossover between managing somebody in a business and managing somebody at a football club. There's obviously a different end goal in terms of what it is you're achieving, but there's lots of crossovers. And it's funny you asked the question, actually, Will, because my dad said to me the other week, he said, driving in Utah will help you become a better coach because you have to be so observant. Now, to give you a bit of background behind that, in Utah, they weave all over the place. There's no fast lane, slow lane, middle. It's just find a gap and go for it. And for me, I'm like a primetime Xavi now when I drive, because I'm checking my mirrors and my shoulders. I'm constantly. And I know that if I don't, you could end up in a sticky situation. So I get to my sessions and I am very observant. I pay attention to what's going on. I know that I can still improve in that area. I don't know if there's a correlation between the two, between me being very observant when I'm driving and being very observant when I'm delivering, but it can't hurt. So yeah, I do. There are a lot of things outside of football, I think, for everybody that they can take from that will then help them within the game.
You've just triggered a memory. You mentioning driving. different perspective. So in Mexico, we used to complain about driving all the time. Oh, it's dangerous. Oh, there's so many obstacles like potholes, dogs, trucks, just people that clearly didn't have any consideration for other road users. And then one day, my mate Chris Hames says, actually, you know what? I think Mexicans are the best drivers in the world because they're able to handle this. Think of what their reactions are, their anticipation skills. And then started to think about, oh yeah, that probably makes a lot of sense. And it definitely supports the idea of ecological dynamics. Fascinating. But Keith, how about yourself?
Yeah, I have a real keen interest, Will, on in the area of personal development. I think before you start to develop others, we got to work with ourselves first. So, you know, my interests are, if we start to tune in to what's going on around us a little bit more, then you've more scope to actually shape both your own character and those that you work with, or you help to transfer them and take them from one place and put them to somewhere else. Now, knowing that doesn't also help them, but it also transfers and provides an element of content and fulfillment on that journey for herself. So my interests outside of the game, I actually think of a contribution. I think they're all connected because, hey, listen, if we weren't doing this now, we'd be doing something else. It's what you do. It's what you focus on whatever you're doing next, or wherever we weren't doing, we'd be doing it. It's to what degree and to what quality and to what standard. So finding out about human behavior and understanding that and what's required actually helps us to facilitate, to help where needed. I know many years ago I was going to fix the planet because of, you know, fancy titles that I thought I had, but they're actually meaningless because people are not interested in what title you've done. They're not really bothered. They're just, all they're interested in is that you care. And what it has done for me in following these personal development courses and attending and delivery of outside of football has got me involved with working with a former chief exec of Lotus Cars, and I'm a football coach. You know, I just take my tracksuit off and I put a pinstripe on, or I put a suit and a tie on, and the transferable skills. David's already alluded to it, the transferable skills. So the only thing that we're never really, we're not the font of everything. And years ago, I believe I had all the answers, but surrounding myself with good people who got commonality. It might be difference in profession, but commonality in wanting to do well, wanting to become an achiever, whatever that may be, or wanting to actually help those that want to become an high achiever. I just enjoy. I get huge fulfillment. You've asked the question earlier, you know, any aspirations future? I don't. I genuinely don't. I'm quite content in where I'm at, watching others doing well. All they need to do is I'll just pop under the surface and then just come above the surface, get some oxygen, share what's required if asked questions, or somebody will contact me for some information or advice. I don't have the answers though. That's the thing. All I'll do is just, because I don't, I'll have a answer. I'll have certain ways in getting the answer for helping them facilitate. So I'm into personal development in a big way, and I think the game now and football, and I implore anyone that, you know, is involved in the game. There is a lot more taking place outside of the game that can help them when working in the game with players. Teaching's one, learning's another. Being an aggressive learner, learning to be uncomfortable in those situations and dealing with it in the moment. You know, then you're looking at the technical detail that may be required and the organisation and plan. All of that part plays, you know, play huge roles in the game. But getting to understand self is important, and then become the best version of that is is something that I don't know whether you'll ever aspire to become, the best version of yourself. But I think if you've got a target, it certainly helps. You've got somewhere to go, because if you don't, where are you going? You've got to have a direction.
So I really like what you're saying and thoroughly enjoy listening to your journeys. I'd like you now both to think back something you wish you had learned sooner. So we're talking a lot about relationships, and it's a people-driven game, and that there's a lot of transferable skills from one industry to the next because it's connection, it's communication. So something you wish you'd learned sooner.
For me, analytics and neuroscience. I think neuroscience is, my gut tells me this, neuroscience will be the next biggest thing. I think we talk about it, lots of waffle. I don't think anybody's nailing it currently. When we get to understand how we actually do operate as a human being, because we're all different, we all have our own little footprint, but yet we may communicate and speak to each other, the same. Well, we're not. Neuroscience would be one, Will, and analytics is something that I believe will be something that I would have picked up, like to have done, because I think that's the future. Again, linking to the neuroscience.
Okay, and David?
I would say, I've been good at this because of the people I grew up around and all of the things the experiences that I had before I coached, but the relationships that you build, and they're more important than what you know. It's something that over time I've got better at, and I've still got a long way to go with it, but that would be one. And then also just to follow on to what my dad said, I got myself a degree and it was useful, but looking back, I probably wish I'd have done it in something like that related to something like sports science or around analytics, because I think the more strings you have to your bow, the better it is. So what I got my degree in is useful. I think getting it in one of those things would have been much more beneficial now for me, and also neuroscience. So once I'm done with my USA license, I'll probably be exploring the options of getting a master's in one of those areas, because I think it'll just help me grow even more and probably provide more value for those around me too.
So you both mentioned neurolinguistic programming a couple of times, and for someone who's got no idea what it is but is intrigued, where do you recommend they go to start off learning about it?
That's a great question.
Can I jump in on that one?
What now, or do you want to? Are you butting in?
I'll butt in. There's a book called Teaching Excellence. It is one of, if not the best book I've ever read. It's by a guy called Dr. Richard Bandler. He's actually the co-creator of Neurolinguistic. So he founded it a while back now, but that book it's an NLP book, but it's around teaching. Well, as a coach, you are a teacher. You're an influencer, and you're in an environment where you are teaching people and helping them get better. So there's a book called Teaching Excellence. For me, that would be a great place to start and give you an idea around how you can become even better at what it is you do. And then from there, of course, there's a cost to this, but if you were to do any NLP stuff, I would highly recommend doing it with Dr. Richard Bandler and a guy called John Laval and his wife Kathleen. My dad and I my dad did his 20 odd years ago, but I went to London with my dad in 2019 and did one of those courses. And then I went to Orlando a few months later and did the master practitioner course, both with the same people. So there was a cost behind that, but it was worth every single penny. And to be honest, I would and do want to do them again because of how much value I got from them.
The thing with, you hear a lot about neurolinguistic programming, you use the term, it can be frighten the life out of people. In actual fact, it's the structure, subject and matter. We're using language all the time. What the founder, one of the co-founders of NLP has done, they just model excellence. We don't have to reinvent anything nowadays. There's very little that's new. All we got to do is adapt to things that are actually invented or reinvented. So we reinvent the car. The car no longer is the Model T, the Ford. It's now we got electric cars. It's the evolution. Is one of, if well, he is. I have never met a genius before in my life. We talk about it. He's an absolute genius, in my opinion, of course. And I've never met anyone like him. And you know, I'm not a follower of anyone. I'm my own man, but I believe in what I'm saying. But you know, there's lots of derivatives from NLP, and I don't know how good or how we influence, but we're always influencing. And we're in this area of development and of influence, because that's what we do. We cannot not influence people, but when we do that, can we influence with integrity and authenticity, and do it with meaning to actually help drive, you know, the future coaches. But you know, so David's he's already mentioned it. There's certainly a couple of books. There's a book out there. There's many others, but anything in and around Richard Bandler, I would highly recommend.
So I'd like to ask you 2 more questions before we finish off talking about the podcast and the book. First one is, I'd like you to think back, because people can learn from these experiences, a time in your coaching journeys where you have overcome a form of adversity or disappointment. Something's gone wrong, something's not gone the way you've planned, and you've had to get through it. And it may have been a little bit ugly, but also, what have you learned from it? Can you think of any times like that?
Yeah, of a few, which, yeah. So I had an experience where I was asked to put in for a role that I'd already got a job. So it was full-time football, and I've never had I guess we're always being interviewed, aren't we? But it was a formal interview, and when I went for the interview, the job had already gone. So the club had already brought in a manager. There's a new manager in who'd already brought in someone that he knew, but it was already set in motion. So what do you do with it? It was the biggest gut wrench. And I knew after, you know, the coaches were calling me gaffer and all that. And I knew traveling, because I had to travel a couple of hours away from where I lived, or not quite an hour and a half, but not quite 2 hours. But I knew on that way back, late that night, part way on my journey, Will, I got it was like something had thumped me in the chest, and it was a gut feeling I hadn't got this job, and I was told I got it. I wasn't told during the interview whether I got it or not, and I thought I'd done okay. As it turned out, I didn't. What you do with it, you can either live with it. I think you have to let it settle. What I had to do is let it settle, and I think we all deal with things slightly differently, but I had to digest and process this in such a way where it was the only job that I've ever wanted in life, football-wise, where it was mine, and I felt it would have had a big impact and a big influence, both at the club, coaches and players. Whether I would or wouldn't, it would have been another thing, but that's what I believed at the time, because I believed in what I was doing was not revolutionary, but definitely made a difference. So I had to deal with it, and you then have to reach out to your resources and share it, not keep it inside your head. So rather than keeping it and swilling it and thinking and considering what I could have done and should have done and I didn't, I had to share it with people I confided in. And that's what I'd suggest, and that's what I did. And, you know, they come up with a different perspective from the one that I had. And then they come up with a solution, or they come up with a solution they thought would work for me. And then I just make the decision from there. And as it turned out to be they were very good. It was great advice. So in times of adversity, you've got to dig deep, reflect on it, then tap into people that you know of, and people outside of football, to people outside your own sphere, will come up with something that you wouldn't even imagine they'd come up with. But they put a different angle on it, a different spin, and that certainly helped. And I'll use that continually because it's all relative.
And David, how about yourself?
I would say, Will, as a player, I overcame countless disappointments and times of adversity. Much more as a player than as a coach, that's for sure. And to be honest, it wasn't very hard because of the amount of setbacks I had as a player. But because of how many obstacles I did face, I built up good coping mechanisms. So I think if things don't go your way, if you have a bad day or a situation derails you, it is normal to let it impact you. But if you hold on to those negative emotions for too long, it impacts then what precedes it and what comes next. I have a story. So in 2014, in the lead up to the MLS draft, I was actually one of the top players, one of the top left backs going into the MLS draft. And 3 months before it, I got a knee injury. Or 4 months before it, sorry, I got a knee injury. I had a partial MCL PCL tear and missed about 5 weeks. My dad was actually over during the time when I got injured. I came back, I got cleared on a Monday, played a game on the Tuesday. So I was out for a while, came back, played, scored, everything was great. And you think, you know, after all that adversity, we're in a good spot now. I'm back, I'm firing, I'm ready to go. So game Tuesday played, I had Wednesday off, Thursday off, and on Friday, I broke my arm in training. Just freak injury, absolute freak injury. That situation, and it was gut-wrenching because I knew at that point I was out for a while. It was several months, and there was probably around, for the rest of the day, maybe 24 hours, that it hit me, and it hit me hard. But after that, I had to build up a plan of how I could come back and be better and do better than what I'd done previously or prior to that. So those kind of experiences for me as a player really helped build up good coping mechanisms that now as a coach, I've had situations where things haven't gone to plan, but they feel minuscule in comparison to what I've had to deal with previously, because there's so many different experiences and stories that I've had that they've been tough. So like I said, I tend to give it a day or so, but then I ask for advice and I use people as soundboards to reflect on what could be done better next time, what I can do better. And sometimes I don't like those conversations because I don't like what I'm hearing, because sometimes it's down to what I've done that I could do better. And a few months ago, I had a conversation with my dad. I'd taken a group and they'd lost in a game, and in the scheme of things, it wasn't that big. But at the time, I was obviously quite frustrated, and he actually said to me, is what's happening being impacted by the way you are? Is it impacted by your energy on the sideline? What are you demonstrating as a coach? What could you do differently to help? And there was no answer in there. They were solely just questions. But they took me internally to realize that really I probably wasn't doing as good as what I could have been doing. So was my energy good on the sideline? It wasn't bad. Could it be better? Yes, it could. Could it have been a more positive energy? Absolutely. And I adjusted accordingly. Now, in that initial conversation, I was probably listening on the phone thinking, he's not helping me here. Because now he's questioning, and what I could feel like he's questioning me, but you reflect on it and I go, you know what? He was spot on. He asked me the questions, and from there, it obviously takes me to a place where I can then improve and be better. But I think with adversity, we've had this saying, no man is his own island, that you need to have people around you that you can use and that you can use as a soundboard and that can give you advice and true and honest advice, that even though at the time you might not necessarily like it, it's done with the right intention to help you. And I know I'm in a fortunate position where I have quite a few people in my life that are mentors that help me when I do have adversity or disappointment, to help me moving forward, so that if I come maybe have those experiences again, that I'll be in a bit better position to deal with that, or to prevent it from happening again.
One of the best things about this type of medium and about, well, books, articles, anything that you can consume about other coaches, is that we don't have to make all of the mistakes ourselves. We can learn a lot from other people, and also how they cope with it. So listening to you both, there's a lot of great points for people that might face their own issues and how they can deal with it. Thank you for sharing. So last one I'd like to ask you, and it might be a bit of a stretch for you to think of something on the spot, but you've both worked in lots of different football environments all around the world, and you've seen a lot. So I'm thinking quite selfishly, as an Englishman, about what you've seen, what you've learned that could benefit us as a country. Obviously, England men have done very well recently, reaching the final. Youth teams are doing really well. Women's teams doing much better as well. And I think got good hopes for next summer. What have you seen in all of the places you've been? If you can think of maybe just one thing that we can pick up from other countries, from other places, that we can do a lot better in, something, I don't know, maybe, particularly if you go to the Asian countries, some of the technology they have, they're light years ahead of us. But in a football sense, what are we missing out on? What's out there that we need in England?
We need, I think we're already on it to a degree, and we're not, although we are our own little island, what we need to be is we need to embrace technology. We need to be more open-minded about what is possible and take the blinkers off of, we are a nation that is extremely proud of what we think we're capable of achieving. We've actually not achieved a great deal. We are, I think we're on the move. We have to be constantly on the lookout for things that can actually help direct the game, so that we're no longer talked about as a potential. I'm English, and I want the English national teams to win things. I want the Premier League, of which I now believe is the best league in the world. Years ago, I would never say it. We have, but it's not English. It's not an English, it's full of international players. So we need to embrace what those countries have been doing, like Belgium, like Germany, like Holland, like Asian countries in terms of the technology. What are they doing? What are they doing that doesn't dislodge what we are doing? Because our model works, because it's the model. We're not going to be changing things radically, but technology is the thing, Will, for me, that we need to do. We do need to embrace technology. I'm referring to analytics. I'm referring to not artificial intelligence, but when you can put goggles on now, and we need to embrace that. That's the future. whether we like it or not, it's coming. You know, I look at these things now. Take this. My telephone's got more power than what the space modules had when they first went to the moon. We have to embrace it. There's nothing, but then how do we integrate it for greater good for the game? Is really out of my skill set, but we can't just tough it away. It's here, and we need to make sure that we align it with where we want to be going with game technology. Sorry, with coach education, and likewise with the game models. And that's a very, very difficult question, or a difficult answer, or difficult question for me to be very specific. We've had to summarize it. Technology is one, and we have to learn. I think we have to pick up on who are the sharpest brains on the planet for quick learning. We're not very good at learning, teaching. I think there are some very good ones, but I don't think we're only scratching the surface. We're not even, it's minuscule in what is possible. So go and search them out, get them whichever country they come from, and let's have them. Let's bring it, because it's not our game any longer. It's a world game, this, isn't it? Football. We spoke earlier. One ball touches so many lives. Well, that's what we need to be doing. Let's go and find out the best teachers. What are they doing, and let's model what they're doing. You don't have to reinvent it. We just need to immerse it into our programs.
Just have you said a couple of times now, we don't have to reinvent things. We just really need to improve and become a lot more efficient at it, don't we? So, David, how about you? Any thoughts on that?
A lot of the similar. Yeah, a lot of the same stuff, really, Will. I think you take what other people are doing well and you put it in your own environment and mold it around what you're already doing that's good. So, and I think as well as that is actually going out and getting experiences in other countries as coaches. So there was a big thing a few years ago, and it's starting to happen now, about English players never playing abroad. They never did it. Well, what about English coaches going abroad and going to Germany and going to Italy and going to Holland and going to Spain and all of these other places, and taking things that work in those environments to then bring them back and put them into environments in our country that may then benefit us, because there'll be lots of different things that are going on that we don't know about that could help us. And I think there was a point where it was very much English players with English players only play in England, English coaches only coach in England. And I'm not going to say it's an arrogance, but there was an element of, we've got ours, we don't need anything else. And I think it has changed. Look, players are going abroad. You're getting a lot of coaches now going abroad. I think there's a lot of benefit to that. I think there's a lot of benefit. So Mick Beale was a friend of my dad's that worked at Liverpool together, and we've subsequently had him on our podcast twice. And he actually spoke about the importance of learning different cultures. So we're in a country now where there are lots of different cultures. There's people from all over the world that move to England that now represent the national team. They come from different backgrounds. And I think having that array of experiences of working in different cultures, maybe just speaking different languages, learning stuff about people that can help you moving down the line. So that would be probably a big one for me, that just going to different places, working in different environments, and really stealing stuff.
Yeah.
Stealing stuff from countries that are maybe doing things in certain areas better than we are now. My dad mentioned it. We're on a path. I think as a country, we're on an upward spiral in terms of where we're at, the players that we're producing, the coaches that we've got. And the one thing that I would hate to see go missing, and I hope it never does, because I was fortunate to go up around it, is the detail around the game. So individual detail, player detail in terms of coaching. That we can be very good at facilitating sessions, but are we exceptional? Are we very good, and are we exceptional at teaching the detail? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I can't make comment about other countries either, because I haven't had enough experiences to answer that question either. I'm still learning there. But yeah, the things for me that I think we could always, the game's constantly changing, like we spoke about, the world constantly changing. So if you stand still, you get left behind.
That's true. Absolutely true. So let's finally talk about book and the podcast. And I've got through a fair few episodes of the podcast now. It's great. The people you have on there are they're so fantastic. And like yourselves, generous with their time. They're full of really insightful experience. And it's great that technology allows us to be able to listen and to learn and in this way. And the book as well, it's very easy to read, and I might be wrong here, but I don't believe you talk about technique or tactics in there. It's all about communication, relations, how you make people feel. It's all about it's about psychological and social skills mainly. And that it's a cliche that we've heard a lot of times, and something I didn't quite necessarily believe when I first started coaching is that it's more about the people. Yeah, sure it is. And then as I've become more experienced, more older, and hopefully wiser, I've learned just how true that is. Of course, the X's and O's are important, but to an extent, it has a ceiling, whereas relationships with people, communication, management, teaching, all of that stuff, that's what really makes a difference. And it's almost feels like a team that is average, but with a good environment, can beat a better team with a bad environment. So firstly, what got you onto the podcast? What started that? And then we'll talk about the book out of that. So what inspired you to start the podcast?
The podcast will actually came because of the book. So
but you weren't done with it. So many ideas, and you just wanted to keep sharing them and get more insight from people after you'd written the book.
Yeah, we wrote the book, and because of that, we got asked to go on podcasts and did quite a lot. And then obviously COVID hit, and we were still doing podcasts. And then it just kind of just like the book, really. It was, we need to do a podcast, and it was a conversation between my dad and myself. And yep, okay, let's do it. And 55 episodes now down the line, here we are, and we're going strong, and it's still gonna keep going. But really, it started because of the book. If it wasn't for the book, we probably wouldn't be doing a podcast. I don't think my dad would know what a podcast is if it wasn't for that, because we did only after writing it were we asked to be on podcasts, and there were opportunities to speak to people, to meet people. We've met so many great people now, both from featuring on and from having guests on our podcast. But yeah, the like I said, it came from the book, and the book itself, you mentioned about relationships, and somebody said something to me a couple of weeks back around teams, and the quote that was used was, people say there is no I in team. So I disagree. There are 11 I's in a team. And I went, wow, I like that, because without the individuals, there isn't a team anyway. It's all it is just a group or a collection of people that are put together. And you have to build and form relationships, whether it's football, whether it's rugby, whether it's basketball or tennis or business, whatever it is, you have to build relationships with people. And really, a relationship with a person is like a flower. If you water the flower and you look after and you maintain it, the flower's okay. If you leave it and let it, you don't water it, you don't take care of it, it wilts and it dies. And relationships can be the same. So if you have someone in your environment that you don't take care of that relationship, you don't revisit things, there is a chance that that relationship can wilt away. And like you said, the book is nothing, absolutely nothing to do with X's and O's. There's no techniques, there's no tactics. It's all psychosocial. It's all about the relationships that you build with people. It's all about how you do it and the techniques behind it, because there's a lot of people, it's well known now. It's not that people know it's about relationships. It's about the relationships and the stuff that you do or the relationships that you build with people. But there are ways in which you can get from A to B faster. And the book that we wrote is about how you get there faster. How do you build relationships with people, meaningful relationships with them, through the techniques that we've shared in the book. So my dad, I'm sure he'll explain where the book came from and how that came about too.
Yeah, well, you don't clock on at 8 o'clock and then become a coach. We don't do that. If you do that, we're in the wrong game. If it is about where you start, where you end time wise, if you're a coach, you're a coach. And we actually interviewed a guy called Greg Levine, Greg became he got headhunted to work in Formula One for McLaren. And he had a saying which I quite like. You got to prolonged jog. If you go on prolonged jogs, you get burnout. So short sprints rather than prolonged jogs. And that's what coaching is. It's about short sprints. It's about going on a journey and walking. But sometimes you can take the elevator because you can get there quicker. That's what the book is. That's what the book can help you do. It can actually help you. You can do the journey and the walking. But the actual small, short jogs are the chapters to actually get you through to the marathon, which is the game in itself. Now, before you can actually get to know the player, you've got to get to know the person. And that's again, there are strategies that that have been successfully used by effective communicators worldwide, highly effective communicators that are so good at doing what they do. All you do is just model what they do, copy what they do, and away you go. So the book, where did it come from initially? Well, it was 16 years in the making from my perspective. We're coming out of London in 2018, May 2018, and 2019, sorry. And I'd said to David, I'm going to write a book. He's heading to the States, to the airport. I'm heading northbound up to where I live. And I'm going to write a book. And straight away, David, well, I will help you. From then, it was very aggressively put together in terms of energy. For those that know us, we get things done. We do what we say on the tin. It gets done. And if you put your mind to it, anything's possible. So from May through to November 27th, the book came out November 27th, and 2 days later, it went as a #1 bestseller, and it was #1 for a period of time. The book's dedicated to a very dear friend of mine who passed from a brain tumor, a guy called Dick Bate. And it gave real purpose and drive for us when we dedicated the book. And 10% of the profits of the proceeds of the book go to the Giles Trust, which looked after my dear friend in his latter days of life. So it's a meaningful book for us on many levels. It's so many thousands. It's also, although you don't make lots of money from it, but what it has done is helped us to engage with many people like yourself and many others. But it's been read by international managers. It's also been used now in other sports, as we understand it. I know we sold quite a few to Wales Hockey. They're using it as a coaching for coaching principles, and you know that's great, because as you rightly say, it's not an exercise. No, it's a sports book. It's also a business book, so there's lots of strategy in there that can be crossovered and mapped into different aspects of life as well.
So I cannot thank you guys enough for coming on and sharing your knowledge, your insight, your ideas, your experiences. It's been thoroughly entertaining, and I hope that, well, I'm certain that the listeners will gather so much from this. So thank you both very, very much.
Thank you, Will. We really appreciate you taking the time out to have us on as well. It's been lovely to speak to you.
Yeah, thank you, Will. It's been very engaging, and thank you ever so much for creating this.
Thanks again to Keith and David for coming on. Hope you all enjoyed that, as there's so much that can be learned from two excellent guests. Reminder to check out their fantastic podcast Goldust on the two books, Goldust and Lone Wolf. So what does 2022 have in store for you? Where do you want your coaching career to take it? In the last few days, we've had jobs in Cambodia and Bahrain. Make sure your BFCN membership is up to date so you can do those. Also check out our partners Tactic. For those of you looking for affordable analysis software, BFCN members get 10% off. You can view demonstrations of Tactic on our site. We've got lots of guests lined up over the next few weeks, providing some more opportunities to learn from others. See you next time.